One of the greatest boxers of all time, one of my favorites. I think he can be called the biggest sportsman and the most popular sportsman in the 21st century. Muhammad Ali. We all know his story, and we know that closer to the end of his life, he used to suffer from something which is called the Parkinson's disease. All those punches that he had throughout his career, all those punches did not affect his health well. And that led to him having the Parkinson's. Parkinson's can be called the queen of the neurological diseases. And today, GG Medical will explain you why. Before we move into the video, and please share this video with your friends, with everyone that you got, your close relatives and stuff like that, please share, like, and subscribe. The second most common neurological disease, which is really spread in the world right now, is Parkinson's disease. Let me just take a closer view into what the Parkinson's disease really is. Parkinson's disease is basically a condition where your pigmented cells in your substantia nigra, which is located in the midbrain or in mesencephalon, are being degenerated. And usually in the cross-section of the midbrain of those people, you will see substantia nigra having no color. And substantia nigra releases something very important for our body. This is called dopamine. Well, it is not the same dopamine. It is actually the same dopamine, but it is involved in a little bit different pathway, which is differing from those reward system that we have. Actually, dopamine in here plays an absolutely different role, but a very crucial role in our body. You see, our brain cortex, which is obviously composed of the neurons, is discussing with a little bit deeper cerebral structures inside our brain called deep cerebral nuclei about the execution of the movements. Those deeper cerebral nuclei are called basal ganglia. Those basal ganglia are important for your brain to decide whether this movement needs to be done. Your brain also discusses with the cerebellum about the exact trajectory and ideal execution of the movement precisely. But when this connection is lost, your movements are losing their voluntary and balanced characteristic. Now let's take a closer view to the substantia nigra and how does dopamine play a role in here. You know, you have something which is called direct and indirect pathway, and as I said, your brain discusses via those two pathways with your basal ganglia to execute or not execute a particular movement. And the dopamine plays a role in here. Substantia nigra, which synthesizes dopamine, plays a role in here as a part of the nigrostriatal pathway. Nigrostriatal pathway is basically adjusting the voluntary and involuntary movements, direct and indirect pathway, and basically controlling them. Is lost, then your movements are losing their preciseness and obviously tremors arise. One of the main characteristics of the Parkinson's disease are the tremors. And as you can see, with a patient with the Parkinson's disease, he has something which is called resting tremor. And it actually severes whenever the patient is thinking about that movement. And this is actually an interesting phenomenon, that when the patient actually pays attention to something a little bit different from the movement that he should execute, actually the tremor becomes a little bit lesser. And this is an interesting feature about Parkinson's disease. And let's look about more characteristic points of view. What can you see in a Parkinson patient? Well, usually they make smaller steps. Usually their movements are altered. What do I mean by that? How you can check it is that you just ask them to take the paper, take a pen and write their name. Usually their handwrite is something like a bird scratch or something like that, because they cannot draw figures, they cannot draw letters properly, because again, the control, the nigrostriatal pathway is lost. Therefore, the control over the movements is lost as well. Because the substantia nigra neurons actually underwent apoptosis, that dopamine is lost, and that dopamine is in charge of controlling all of this. So dopamine can not only be indicated as a hormone of reward system, but it is one of the most important neurotransmitters of your body. Now let's come back to the patients with the Parkinson's disease. How exactly can we solve? Are these patients lost? Well, not really. Nowadays, the technology is actually advanced very much, and now we have something which is called deep brain stimulation. You can actually see different stories of the patients in advanced age who actually recovered from Parkinson's disease over your somatic motorics. And therefore, you can now normally execute movements without having any sort of tremor. Well, but does this affect only sportsmen? There is actually a little myth that this affects only the sportsmen, only the advanced sportsmen like mixed martial arts, boxers and stuff like that. Parkinson's is a disease with really unclear mechanism why the apoptosis of the substantia nigra develops. They are seeing that there are Lewy bodies developing and they are somehow contributing to the death of the neurons, but it is thought that the oxidative stress or lack of oxygen is underlying cause of the death of the neurons. What do I mean by that? Maybe if you have some cardiovascular problems of the vessels that supply the basal ganglia, and therefore the oxidative stress is happening, and therefore your neurons are undergoing oxidative stress, and the mechanisms of the apoptosis are being activated. And therefore, when these boxers get all these micro head traumas whenever they are undergoing like heavy spars or when they are going with a fight without the helmets and stuff like that, actually helmets do not really help much, but still, basically the micro bleedings occur within the central nervous system, and this might be, it is thought to be an accelerating factor for the development of the Parkinson's disease. And today we are done. I hope that you did whatever I asked you, and I hope to see you next time.